It is now my distinct honor to introduce today's graduation speaker. It's no coincidence that our most prominent politicians are often trained as attorneys. Think of Lincoln. Before he became president, he was one of the most successful corporate lawyers in Illinois. Further back in time, but closer to home, think of James Wilson, Penn's first law professor and one of the two primary authors of the U.S. Constitution. The law teaches you to confront every fault line in our society. And by overcoming these fissures, lawyers and politicians alike help us realize a set of civic ideals that unite us. Our speaker this afternoon, a former prosecutor and top official in the Justice Department and one of the most successful American mayors in history, will forever be associated with a stunning act of civic leadership. On one of the darkest days in our nation's history, he reminded the entire country of the spirit that unites us. Rudolph Giuliani's actions on September 11, 2001, and the aftermath of that tragic day vaulted him into the national political ranks. His honor, the mayor, became America's mayor, the man who stood as a pillar of strength when our nation needed him most. I suspect almost everyone in this hall remembers the dust-covered march he headed on the day of the attacks, leading a battered troop of New York City officials, citizens, and reporters northward from the wreckage of the Twin Towers to reestablish city government in a firehouse uptown. His public statements on 9/11 resonate, especially now that the new Freedom Tower has surpassed the Empire State Building as New York's tallest building. He said at the time, "Tomorrow, New York is going to be here, and we're going to rebuild, and we're going to be stronger than we were ever before. I want the people of New York to be an example to the rest of the country and the rest of the world that terrorism can't stop us." We value that indomitable spirit in law school, and perhaps that's where our speaker first learned it, in his case, at New York University. He began his legal career by doing something I've urged so many of you to do. He clerked. After serving with the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York, Giuliani joined the Office of the U.S. Attorney, and at the tender age of 29, he was named Chief of the Narcotics Unit and rose to serve as Executive U.S. Attorney. He was then recruited to Washington, where he served as Chief of Staff to the Deputy Attorney General. Following a stint in private practice back in New York, he returned to Washington in 1981 as the Associate Attorney General, the number 3 position in the Justice Department. His colleague at Justice, Ted Olson, has said that Rudy earned a reputation during those early days as one of the most visionary, effective, charismatic, and inspirational leaders we had in Washington. Yet, in 1983, Giuliani returned to become U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Technically, that was a step down, but it tells you something about his passion for the law and for public service that he sought the appointment because he wanted to litigate. As it turns out, his career instincts were spot on. His prosecution of high-profile cases, including several well-known Wall Street figures, brought him into the national spotlight. Few U.S. attorneys in history can match his record of 4,152 convictions with only 25 reversals. Giuliani was elected mayor of New York City in 1993. What he accomplished in his 2 terms of service is remarkable. He took a city widely viewed as in poor shape and engineered an extraordinary urban renaissance. He reduced crime dramatically, implemented the most successful jobs initiative in the country, cut taxes, turned a multi-billion-dollar budget deficit into a budget surplus, and initiated major improvements in the quality of city life. Less frequently remembered, but equally important, he spearheaded the drive to grant gay and lesbian New Yorkers domestic partnership rights, something quite revolutionary at the time, providing broad protection for same-sex partners. After leaving office as mayor, he pursued a successful career in the private sector. He did run for the Republican Party presidential nomination in 2008 and reportedly considered other runs, but has ultimately decided instead to remain active in his business career. Throughout all of this period, he's continued to speak out on public issues and to speak his mind. Mr. Giuliani has described himself as an optimist by nature, someone, as he puts it, who thinks things will get better. And in his finest hour, our speaker demonstrated the courage and the heart to take charge and communicate that resilience to a stunned nation. His optimism was more than just a trait of his personality that served him well on a single day. In the years before 9/11, he had changed the entire feel of his city. That willingness to take responsibility and envision a better future is the very definition of leadership. Reflecting on the arc of his public career several years ago, the historian Vincent J. Canato wrote, "With time, Giuliani's legacy will be based on more than just 9/11. He left a city immeasurably better off, safer, more prosperous, more confident than the one he had inherited 8 years earlier, even with the smoldering ruins of the World Trade Center at its heart. By any measure, he is a man of remarkable accomplishments, and we are honored to have him with us today. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Rudolph Giuliani."
Thank you very much, Dean. Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Dean. It's a great honor to be here, and I want to congratulate all of the graduates, all of the teachers, and in particular all of the family members that are here. This is a joint accomplishment. And before I say anything else, I want to make certain that you understand how much I respect this. I tried to remember my law school graduation, but it was so long ago I don't. It's only a vague memory. I do remember thinking, being really, really very, very thankful that I had finished law school, and then thinking, oh my gosh, the bar exam. So I wish you all good luck. But I do want to express to you an advantage that you have, whether you practice law or you don't. But just in having gotten a law degree, you have a great advantage. And there's an old story, and I think it's a true one. A doctor, a priest, and a lawyer die at the same time. And they go to heaven. And they get before St. Peter. And St. Peter looks first at the doctor, and he says, "Doctor, you led a very good life. You saved a lot of lives. I'm going to give you a wonderful 4-bedroom condominium in a very, very high-class part of heaven." And then he looks at the priest, and he says, "Father, you saved a lot of souls, and I'm going to give you even a bigger condominium and even a better part of heaven." Then he looks at the lawyer, very stunned. He says, "Were you actually a lawyer?" And the man says, "Yes, I was." He said, "Well, in that case, you get the biggest mansion that I have available in the very best part of heaven." So the priest and the doctor walk away a little stunned. They summon up the nerve, and they go back to St. Peter, and they say, "Peter, I don't understand. We save lives, and we save souls. All this guy ever did was take people's money. How come he got the best place in heaven?" And St. Peter says, "Because we haven't had a lawyer here since Thomas More in the 16th century." So this is a great advantage that you have. It's also a great advantage in life. Almost half our prior presidents were lawyers. Something like 38 to 40% of our Congress is made up of lawyers. And both men running for the presidency of the United States, our present president and our probable Republican nominee, are both lawyers. Both lawyers who really don't practice law anymore, which is a great example of what you can do with a legal background and a legal career. And I always found that being a lawyer, I love doing it. I love practicing law. I love it now. But even during the time I was the mayor of New York City, it helped me a lot to be a lawyer. I don't understand, in the complexity of the world that we live in, you know, in the words of the fictional Thomas More from A Man from All Seasons, "A country planted thick with laws." I don't know how you can guide a business or a government agency or a military unit without having a substantial legal education nowadays. So I think this education that you've gotten will be of tremendous value to you. I also realized when I wrote the book I wrote on leadership that most of the lessons that I learned about leadership, although I never thought I would be a mayor, I never thought I'd run for public office. I never thought I'd run a company. I always thought of myself as being a trial lawyer when I went to law school, largely on the influence of one professor who was the evidence professor at NYU, Professor Rudolph. He taught me evidence. His name was Irving Younger, and he gave me a great passion for wanting to be an assistant U.S. attorney, and that my whole desire in life was to be a trial lawyer. But when I went back and wrote this book about leadership, which I wrote the year before September 11, I realized that most of the lessons that I learned from being a lawyer. And more specifically, I learned them, as Dean Fitz pointed out before, from mentors. See, I'm always asked the question, maybe because of being mayor, maybe because of September 11, I'm often asked, and maybe because I wrote a book about leadership, I'm often asked, are leaders born or made? And I say leaders are made. Of course, they have to get born first. But after that important fact takes place, it's what they learn. It's what is taught to them or what they pick up from other people. And so much of it comes from mentors, role models. You don't realize it, but you're constantly copying other people that you admire. And you're trying to do what they do as well as they do it. So there are 6 lessons that I've kind of thought as the most important about leadership. And I'm going to offer them to you, and I'm going to try to show you how so much of them emerge from either my mentors or my legal background. I think the single most important characteristic of a leader in government, in business, in law, in religion, or in life is you have to have strong beliefs. You have to know what you believe. If you're someone who is still trying to formulate your ideas, that's great. You should spend a lot of time formulating them. But you really can't lead other people when you're still formulating ideas. You know, a leader is like the captain of a ship. Right? In order to be a captain of a ship, it starts with you have to figure out the destination of the ship. If you can't figure out the destination of the ship will go anywhere the winds take it, anywhere the waves take it, anywhere the storms take it. You've got to say, we're going to Bermuda, or we're going to Portsmouth, or we're going to Hong Kong, or wherever it is you're going. You've got to be able to make a decision about where you're going. You have to have goals, you have to have principles, you have to have direction. When I was mayor of New York, I had goals. I had direction, so that people who work with me could help me achieve what I wanted to achieve. If I didn't say, we're going to lower crime, we're going to reduce welfare and move people to work, we're going to change Times Square, it never would have happened. And I learned that principle from President Ronald Reagan, who I had the privilege, as the dean pointed out, to work for as the 3rd ranking official in the Justice Department and then as U.S. Attorney. Now, he happened to have been a role model for me. And I learned that lesson because he had very, very strong beliefs. He had very strong beliefs about communism. He had very strong beliefs about freedom. He had very strong beliefs about how the balance in the economy should work. And he had those beliefs even when they were unpopular. He developed them way back in 1964 when Barry Goldwater was running for president. Barry Goldwater got defeated, I think, in every state but one, his own, Arizona. He was wiped out. These ideas, you could say, were rejected by the American people. And that's when Ronald Reagan first started to speak about them. So these aren't ideas that emerged because he took a public opinion poll and said, well, you know, this is more popular to say this than that, so I'll say it now or I'll say it later. They emerged because he really believed, whether you agree or you don't, or whether I agree or I don't, he really believed that communism was evil, that it needed to be confronted rather than negotiated with. He believed that government had gotten so big that it was holding people back rather than helping them move through poverty. And he executed these beliefs, and he created more change than any American president since Franklin Roosevelt. The Soviet Union gone, the Berlin Wall down, millions of people in Eastern Europe free, and an economy that grew for almost 12 consecutive years with very, very few exceptions. So I took that from him. I borrowed that, and I said, as a mayor, I'm going to set goals, and I'm going to set directions, and if they turn out to be right, I'll get reelected, and if they turn out to be wrong, they'll throw me out of office, and I'll go back to being a lawyer, which I love being. But as one person told me, who gave me advice, govern like you'll be a one-term mayor, and one of two things will happen. You'll be a one-term mayor, or you'll be proud of yourself. And I borrowed that really from Ronald Reagan. The second principle of leadership is one that Dean mentioned. It's optimism. To be a leader, you have to be an optimist. You can't lead if you're a pessimist. In fact, even if you're not a leader, you should be an optimist. You have more friends. Nobody wants to go to dinner with a pessimist. But if you want to be a leader, you have to be an optimist. Suppose when I got up here, I began my speech this way. Oh, things are bad. Economy hasn't remained this weak in who knows how long, since the Depression. Challenge of Iran, North Korea, Russia, China. No hope. There is absolutely no hope. Follow me. Now, of course, nobody follows me, except only one place, New York City, when I do that. A small group of people always get up, and they start walking toward me. You know why? Because there are more nuts in New York than any place else in the country. But that's only because we have more people. But what I mean by being an optimist is you have to be a problem solver. You have to train yourself to absorb setbacks and problems, whether they're in your legal career, in your business life, or in your personal life. And then after you absorb them, you've got to turn around and start thinking about the solution to the problem. I learned that from the judge that I was privileged to be a law clerk for, Lloyd F. McMahon. He taught me that in working on cases and motions, and I tried to teach that to all the young lawyers I've ever had the opportunity to train, either in the U.S. Attorney's Office or the Justice Department or the law firm that I'm a partner in. I always try to teach them to do the following. Say, if you're going to come to me with a problem, I want you to come to me with the problem. But before you do, I want you to take a little time, if it isn't an emergency, and we have a little time, I want you to take a little time and sit at your desk, and I want you to think of the solution, not just the problem. I want you to come to me and train yourself to come to me this way. When I was the mayor, here's the problem. We've got a big hole in our budget. We anticipated tax receipts from Wall Street. They were going to have a great year, but it turns out that they've had a big reversal. Our tax receipts are going to be down, and we're going to have a deficit. But here's what I would want anyone to do. I'd want you then to tell me how you think we're going to address that deficit. Train yourself from the time you go work in a law firm as a young lawyer, which is enormously valuable time for you, maybe your most valuable, or as a law clerk, the way the dean said, or in some other area in business. Train yourself not to run to your boss or your superior or the senior partner or the senior associate with the problem. Train yourself to run to them with the problem and what you think the solution will be. Become a problem solver. And I can tell you the people that succeed, you can see it in law firms with young classes of associates or in mayor's offices with young people who join politics. And people who succeed are the people who are problem solvers. And I can share with you one experience I had as mayor of New York. The year that I was running for mayor, which was 1993, the second time I ran and won, I happened to be on Times Square, and I saw a crime get committed on Times Square, and I ran after the person who did it. The person got away. There were no police officers around. There were thousands of people in Times Square. This poor woman had her purse taken. She had been knocked to the ground. And I helped her, and we got the cops, and They were discouraged, and they basically told her, well, we'll never find the guy, which was really enormously encouraging for this poor woman who had come from the Midwest to see a Broadway show. She gets her purse taken, and the two cops that show up say, basically, don't bother us. So after it was over, I stood there for about 4 or 5 minutes, and I just closed my eyes in the middle of Times Square, and I actually had a daytime dream. I dreamed about what Times Square could be like, sort of based on what it used to be like, not like it was now, which was basically made up of pornography places and drug dealers and criminals. And sometime look at the movie Taxi Driver and look at the scenes of Times Square, and you'll get a chance to see what Times Square was like back then. And I dreamed about it being, different, with legitimate theaters and restaurants, and then I used that as sort of my dream, and then how do we go from where we are now to where we have to be? But if I couldn't think that way, Times Square would have remained the way it remained for 25 years. Taxi Driver, by the way, was in the 1970s. I was now in the 1990s. And you've got to be a problem solver. There is no problem that cannot at least be fixed, if not solved. There are some things that can't be solved. We can never solve crime. We can only reduce it. I hope we can solve poverty. Maybe we can't, but we can certainly reduce it. We can't completely solve inequality. Human beings have been human beings for centuries, and they can be unfair to each other. But we can reduce it. We could make it less of a problem. So train yourself from the time you start practicing law to be a problem solver. Third principle of leadership is courage. And courage is really important for everyone to have, and I learned courage from my father. And then I learned to understand courage from New York City firefighters. Now, courage is really misunderstood because people think of courage as being without fear. They think of New York City firefighters or Philadelphia firefighters or police officers or soldiers and sailors, and they run into battle, they take people out of fires, they put their lives at risk, they jump into rivers and pull people out. And most people say, well, gosh, I'd be too afraid to do that. These people are fearless. Well, if you're fearless, then I would ask you to go see a psychiatrist, because there's something wrong with you. Of course, firefighters and police officers and soldiers and sailors are afraid. They're afraid of fire, they're afraid of being killed, they're afraid of being harmed, they're afraid of being injured. But what they do is they overcome their fear in order to accomplish what they set out to do in the first place. To be a firefighter, a soldier, police officer, whatever. And you're going to have to do that throughout your life. If you're going to be successful, you're going to have to take risks. You're going to have to take risks about jobs that you take. You're going to have to take risks in cases that you handle. You're going to have to take risks in anything that you do. Running for office is a risk of failure. Taking on a case is a risk of loss. Buying a business is a risk of bankruptcy. There's risk in life. And the very best way to handle risk is not to be afraid to do what you have to do, but do the fourth principle of leadership, which is what I learned from firefighters, and that is relentless preparation. What firefighters do with risk is, of course they're afraid to go into a fire, but they train, they practice. They relentlessly prepare. They wear bunker gear. They work with each other. They teach each other how to mitigate the dangers of fire so they can accomplish their goal of pulling children and people out of fires. Actually, I may have learned that lesson way, way back when I was a law clerk, because Judge McMahon had a great rule that I'm going to tell you, and it's one that helped me as a trial lawyer, and it's one that helped me as a mayor, and it's one that helped me throughout life. He used to call it 4 for 1. He used to say for every 1 hour in court, 4 hours of preparation. He'd say you win your cases in preparing, not in the courtroom. Go over everything. Practice it. Have somebody play the witness have somebody play the judge, have somebody play the other lawyer. Go over everything that's going to happen in the courtroom. And if you have more time, go over it again and again and again. Your goal has to be nothing unanticipated happens in the courtroom. By the way, great advice for any risk undertaking. If you have to give up and give a speech or you have to go for an interview, practice. Practice is what takes the fear, uses it as a valuable emotion, and gets you to perform better under pressure. But then there was some real wisdom to the judge's rule. He used to say, no matter how much you anticipate, no matter how much you practice, something unanticipated always happens. The witness lies, the other lawyer comes up with an idea that you didn't think of, the judge comes up with a way out of the nowhere question that you could never have possibly anticipated. And he said, if you follow my rule of 4 to 1, you will know the answer to it. It will just come to you like that. And everybody will say, wow, that person is a really, really smart lawyer. They really think very, very quick on their feet. But it isn't thinking on your feet. It's that you've prepared, and almost anything thrown at you will just be some variation of what you prepared for. And that lesson helped me in court many, many times. But it helped me the most on September 11. Because when I was first told of the attack on the World Trade Center, I was told that a twin-engine plane had hit the North Tower. I did not know how bad it was. I did not know how difficult it was. And to me, it was another terrible event, another terrible emergency, another very, very difficult situation of which you face usually about one a month in New York City. High-rise fires and building collapses and hostage situations and blackouts. And so I rushed down there pretty much figuring it was within the zone of what we have done before, not just me, but all the team that I had. And when I arrived there, and I got below the North Tower, and I started walking toward the fire department command post, police officers were telling me to look up because things were falling from the building. And all of a sudden, I realized that I was seeing something that I just couldn't believe. And I stopped, and I would tell you that for probably 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 seconds, I was in a state of shock. I watched a man throw himself out of the 101st, 102nd floor, fleeing the flames that were behind him. And I just watched him come all the way down. And I said to myself, and then I said to the people around me, this is much, much worse than what we've ever faced before. This is off the charts. We don't have a plan for this. We're just going to have to make up our response. And I grabbed them and I said, we're just going to have to do the best we can. And what I meant by that was we had all these plans, relentless preparation. We used to have a Mayor's Office of Emergency Management that I had started 6 years earlier. We used to train for all kinds of emergencies. We thought we had thought of everything. Anthrax, smallpox, you name it. But we hadn't thought of airplanes being used as missiles attacking our buildings. So I thought we weren't prepared, we'll just have to do the best we can. Then I just had to make decisions. We had to close down the bridges and tunnels coming to New York. We had to evacuate 400,000 or 500,000 people. We had to triage the hospitals. We had to open up the road so we could bring in heavy equipment. We had to cover the priority targets because we thought the terrorists were going to attack maybe another 8 or 9 or 10 times that day. We have been told there were 7 to 9 planes that were still unaccounted for. And we were trying to figure out, well, what buildings are they going to hit, and how many are going to come to New York, how many might go to Chicago, how many might go somewhere else in America. And as I was making those decisions, I remembered the words of Judge McMahon. If you prepare for everything that you can think of, you'll be prepared for even the unanticipated. Because every one of the decisions that I made, and every one of the orders that I gave, came from a plan. It was a different plan, like the decision about triaging the hospitals, came from our plan for West Nile virus. The decision about covering the priority areas that terrorists would hit came from our priority list of terrorist targets that we used to develop with the Joint Terrorism Task Force based on the plans they had when we arrested them, based on the intelligence we got about what they might want to attack. The plan for lighting up Ground Zero so we could operate 24 hours a day was a plan that came from our plan for blackouts. Now, why is that important? That's important because when you operate under pressure, like a trial is, by the way, and like many other situations in life, whether it's an emergency on the scale of September 11 or just the ordinary emergencies we face, the more you can feel that this is something you've done before, the more you can feel that you're in a routine performance as opposed to something under tremendous pressure, the better you're going to perform. This is the reason football teams practice. This is the reason sports teams practice. This is the reason military units have maneuvers. This is the reason firefighters train for fires and just don't go running into the fire. Because when they're under pressure, they want to feel the comfort of feeling this is within our zone of capability. This is something we've done before. And therefore, relentless preparation is enormously important, and every leader has to learn it. The fifth principle is teamwork. You can't accomplish anything, as some of the people before said, without other people. If you think you can, you're going to be a failure. The judge used to have another great lesson that he would teach all his young law clerks when they came to work for him. All these young people who just graduated from law school, good grades, great career ahead of them, smart as heck. He'd say to them, "What do all federal judges have in common?" He'd say, "Judge, I don't know. They're all old." Or they're all cranky. He'd say, no, here's what they all have in common. Every single federal judge is either selected because they were a Republican or a Democrat. And they get appointed because they're Republicans or Democrats. That's just the way it happens in our country. He said, however, some of them, when they get on the bench, start to believe that they were appointed by God. God put me here. I know everything. I don't need any help. I know all the answers. Here's a great lesson if you're ever put in charge of anything, whether it's a case with 2 or 3 other lawyers, or a business, or a government agency, or a social club. Ask yourself, what are my weaknesses? What don't I do well? If the answer to that is none, nothing, no weaknesses, ask your wife, or your husband, or your significant other, or your children, or you have weaknesses. So go find people who can balance your weaknesses with their strengths. You know, all throughout my life, I've made decisions very quickly. That's really good in an emergency. When it's not an emergency, one would call that impatience. And it is. I know that. So I make sure that I have people around me who slow me down. One in particular, who's been my partner, law partner, business partner, counsel as mayor, and chief assistant when I was United States Attorney. We've been together for almost 30 years, and he does many, many other things, but his main job is to stop me from making impulsive, quick decisions, which I know about myself, I do. And my biggest mistakes in life is when he was on vacation. But you're going to have strengths and weaknesses like this, and you've got to be able to recognize it. When I became mayor, I had to do 2 big things. I had to reduce crime in a city that was considered the crime capital of America, and I had to turn around the economy because we had 10.5% unemployment, $3 billion deficit, and we had just lost 400,000 jobs, and we couldn't lose anymore. And I knew a lot about how to reduce crime. My background, as you heard, was law enforcement. I had worked at the lowest level and the highest level, and I felt really confident I would know how to reduce crime. I did not feel confident I would know how to turn the economy around. And I had to get really good people to help me. But I had to really rely on the people that I got to help me with the economy because they knew a heck of a lot more about it than I did, and I had to learn from them. And I think most of my success in life has happened because of other people. The mentors that I've talked to you about, and then the people that help you do the work that you have to do, whether it was the U.S. Attorney's Office or the Mayor's Office. One of them is here with me today, and he's the one who got me to come here and do this, Randy Mastro. Randy was a graduate of Penn Law School in 1802. But he's old like I am. He's a great, great lawyer now at Gibson Dunn, one of their great trial lawyers and litigators. He helped me take over the Teamsters unit and take it away from the mafia when I was the United States Attorney. He helped me take the Fulton Fish Market away from the mafia, and he helped me take a lot of New York City away from the mafia. That's why we can't go to Italian restaurants in New York City. And then when I was mayor of New York, he was my chief of staff and my chief deputy mayor for a very, very long time. And he helped to make tremendous changes in New York City because he must have gotten at this law school what everyone was telling you about. Not just a desire to be a great lawyer. He is a great lawyer, one of the best in America, but he had the desire to serve, the desire to give something back, the desire to assist. And a final lesson is communication. To be a lawyer, you have to be a leader, you have to communicate. And boy, you really learn how to do that as a lawyer. And I'm going to give you one lesson, again, from Judge McMahon about communication. And probably this is the greatest failing of many, many lawyers. And the ones who overcome it become lawyers like Randy Mastro. Keep it simple. Don't talk lawyer to people. And don't do it to judges. Judge McMahon used to say the worst thing was that all these lawyers, the patent lawyers and the admiralty lawyers, and they'd come in and they talk patents and they talk admiralty. And most judges aren't experts. They are very good lawyers and they have great legal education, but they don't know the expertise of your particular little case. So the great art of being a good lawyer, I know this is true of a litigator, but I think this is true of a lawyer communicating with a client, is make it simple. Make it understandable. Don't forget about speaking English, plain English. Take complex legal principles and train yourself to make them understandable to people. Practice it. Practice it with your friends. See if you can make complex legal principles simple, and you will be a great lawyer. Because to be a lawyer or to be a leader, you have to communicate. So, as you noticed, I mentioned all the people that were my role models and mentors. Every single one of them, yes, was a successful person, but all of them were lawyers, and they were all public servants. And I think lawyers serve in many, many different ways, either in courtrooms, in boardrooms, in poor communities trying to help people move out of poverty and trying to establish equality for people. But you should say to yourself, you've been very, very fortunate, and you have put yourself in at least some kind of 1%. I don't know if it's the 1% we talk about rich and all. You could probably be there if you wanted, but certainly the 1% in terms of just having had the benefits of this great, great education that you've had. And your real obligation is to give something back. You don't have to do it right away. If you can, that's great. But you look out on your 30, 40, 50-year, 60-year legal career, and you say to yourself, some of it has to be devoted to public service. Otherwise, it won't be a complete legal career. And finally, I don't even think you can be a good lawyer if you haven't had spent some time in public service. Because understanding how the government operates, whether it's the local, the state, or the national government, is absolutely vital to being able to advise your clients and represent them correctly. So you have an obligation to give something back. You've been very fortunate. God has blessed you. Life is very, very strange. Unfortunate things can happen. Lucky things can happen. You've had the good fortune of this great education. Now make use of it, not just to help you. I mean, that's fine, but make use of it to help other people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was a wonderful speech. lessons not only on legal careers and on leadership, but obviously on life as well, from one of our country's foremost leaders and lawyers as well. He lives what he speaks. As is our custom, we have a commemorative statue that we give to our graduation speaker, and it's particularly appropriate, I think, today. It's a picture of a statue of the young Benjamin Franklin, founder of the University of Pennsylvania, walking forth in gratitude to Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, Penn Law Commencement speaker, May 14th, 2012, and it looks like a young Mayor Giuliani.